All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking a literal cinematic journey back in time to explore a single day that was, well, less of an ending and more of a violent, absolutely necessary reset. We are looking at the exact minutes and hours that wiped out an entire era and completely reshaped the trajectory of life on our planet. We're going to break down the data, the timeline, and the incredible, almost unbelievable narrative of the day the Earth literally stopped.
Think about this for a second. There was a time when the Earth breathed in silence, a time when no man called it home. Millions of years ago, the forests were these endless seas of green, and the oceans were just full of light. Life flourished absolutely everywhere. It was free, it was wild, and incredibly ancient. This was the Cretaceous period, a time characterized by an undisturbed, majestic harmony.
Okay, so picture this perfect world. And, it truly was perfect in its ferocity and its balance. Imagine herds of triceratops just roaming under a sun that never knew winter. You've got these enormous pterosaurs cutting through the air like living sails. And down on land, the undisputed king of the whole shebang, the Tyrannosaurus Rex. To put just how incredibly ancient and established this world was into perspective, the T-Rex actually lived closer in time to us right now than it did to the Stegosaurus. Crazy, right? It was this entire ecosystem of colossi, 2 tons of pure muscle, claws, and fangs, where every single creature had a role and every heartbeat mattered in this flawlessly balanced food web.
But think about the sheer contrast going on here. On one hand, you had the undisputed rulers of the daylight, the giants. Massive ankylosaurs with bone armor glinting like living shields, and agile predators totally dominating the landscape. But then, hiding out in the shadows beneath the deep roots of those ancient ferns, were the tiny mammals and insects. They were alert, wary, and honestly, entirely forgotten by the giants stomping around above them. They were just living on the absolute margins, unknowingly waiting for a future they didn't even realize they had.
But even in that perfect, balanced harmony, an invisible fate was unfolding. Far, far away, in the cold, silent darkness of space, a threat was already moving. A fragment of rock, born from some violent collision of ancient celestial bodies, had begun a quiet, inevitable journey. And down below, the Earth, totally unaware, just continued to rotate, safely cradled by its blue sky.
Now you've got to understand, this wasn't just some sudden event in the cosmic sense. It was literally millions of years in the making. Millions of years ago, this chunk of rock crossed the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Weeks before the actual impact, it entered Earth's cosmic neighborhood, locking into our gravitational field and really starting to accelerate. Days before, it shot right past the Moon's orbit, and just moments before, its course tilted directly toward the atmosphere. As it plummeted, the air ahead of it began to compress and heat up so fast, turning the surface of this silent rock completely incandescent. The Earth was completely, 100% vulnerable.
Imagine being down on the surface. The dinosaurs were experiencing their very last dawn. And then, the sky just began to change color. The birds stopped singing, the animals froze, almost as if the Earth itself were holding its breath in anticipation. And then came the light, a blinding flash that would have instantly blinded any creature looking at it, completely blotting out the sun. This was immediately followed by a roar that had no echo, because it so violently surpassed the speed of sound itself. Time, for a brief, terrifying second, just stood still.
10 kilometers. Let that number sink in. We're talking about a rock roughly the size of Mount Everest hurtling directly towards the Yucatán Peninsula. It's just a single body of rock, sure, but harboring a destructive force far, far beyond any weapon humanity has ever even imagined.
And it wasn't just big, it was moving incredibly fast, like 70,000 kilometers per hour fast. At that sheer, terrifying velocity, the asteroid crossed the final few kilometers of our sky in less than a single breath. It compressed the atmosphere in front of it so intensely that the air itself literally became hotter than the surface of the sun.
When it struck, the energy released was incomprehensible, equal to over 100 million megatons. To put that into perspective, that is the equivalent of billions of atomic bombs detonating all at the exact same fraction of a second. The impact vaporized the sea in an absolute instant. The Earth's solid crust folded like a delicate veil of sand. Rock literally melted into liquid, and the sky itself ignited.
In the immediate, horrifying fraction of a second after impact, nothing within thousands of kilometers survived. A massive shockwave just swept across the entire planet, instantly burning and erasing endless forests. The air itself turned to flame. A towering tsunami, over 1 kilometer high, rose up and swept across coastlines thousands of miles away. And then, all those rocks that had been hurled up into space by the initial blast, they came back. They fell back down as incandescent stars, creating this continuous, incessant rain of fire. Day and night just merged into a single, howling inferno.
Down on the surface, the temperatures spiked to an unimaginable 1,000 degrees. The entire planet basically turned into a global furnace. The sheer physics of it are just awe-inspiring. The heat was so intense that even the rocks deformed, flowing around like hot wax. The largest dinosaurs simply collapsed, suffocated by the blistering heat, as rivers evaporated and clouds vanished entirely from the sky.
And the sheer physical scar this thing left behind is just staggering. The impact opened up a crater over 20 kilometers deep and 180 kilometers wide. Now, while that crater sits safely hidden beneath the sea in the Yucatan today, at the time its effects were felt globally. Shockwaves literally circled the entire globe multiple times, bouncing and reflecting off oceans and mountains. With every single vibration, an ecosystem was erased. In just a matter of hours, the world as it was known completely vanished.
Eventually, the fires did die down, but then the day turned black. We entered what's known as the Long Dark. See, that rock just so happened to hit a highly sulfur-rich area of the Earth's crust. All that sulfur vaporized straight up into the atmosphere, creating this unbelievably dense shield of ash and gas that completely blocked the sun. It settled on the seas, on the mountains, and upon the open eyes of the fallen giants. That dust remained suspended for months, maybe even years, plunging the entire world into an abrupt nuclear winter and an eternal freezing twilight.
So it actually wasn't just the initial fire that ended the giants. It was the total collapse of the food web. First, all that suspended ash blocked out the sun's light entirely. Without light, photosynthesis abruptly stopped and vegetation died off. Deprived of their immense plant diets, the massive herbivores simply starved and fell. And finally, with no prey left, the top predators, like the mighty T-Rex, left wandering a frozen, charred wasteland, well, they finally succumbed as well. The giants vanished in a really slow, merciless chain reaction.
But here's the incredible twist. Even as the Earth breathed nothing but ash, the story wasn't over. Beneath that gray blanket, something still moved. The first heart of the future beat. Deep underground, in the thick mud, down in the burrows between the rocks, small lives resisted. Because they could burrow and hide from that initial extreme heat and the subsequent freezing cold, these tiny mammals actually managed to hold on.
Fast forward a bit. Decades slowly passed. The dust finally begins to settle. A weak, pale sun eventually filters back through those clouds of death. The ice begins to melt, and the very first light of a brand new world touches the silent Earth. It was a world without the great dinosaurs, sure, but it was a world that was ready to begin again. The first drops of rain washed the blackened soil, penetrated the cracks, and found those forgotten seeds.
And slowly but surely, the world actually begins to breathe again. Moss and ferns sprout up among the burnt trunks. Insects and small reptiles emerge from the mud. And those tiny mammals we talked about earlier, the ones hiding out in the shadows at the very beginning of this explainer, they finally stepped out into the light. Where giants once walked, these light, agile, silent creatures now ran free and dominated the reborn plains.
So what does this all mean for us? Well, this marks the dawn of the age of mammals. This is absolutely crucial to understand because it connects that incredibly distant day directly to you and me. The Chicxulub impact didn't destroy life, it transformed it. It cleared the stage for a new, much more adaptable, and ultimately more intelligent kind of life to evolve. The destruction of the dinosaurs was literally the spark that lit the era, leading directly to creatures capable of remembering, building, and dreaming. Basically, it led to us.
It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it? We literally walk on the memory of that day every single time we pick up an ancient stone. Life always finds a way to adapt and begin again, no matter the devastation. But it leaves you wondering, if a single day from space could end the undisputed giants of the Earth, what will our era leave behind in the rocks for the future to find? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Next time you pick up an ancient stone, seriously,